guys, welcome back to my channel Salesforce Noob. So in this video we are going to learn about how we can implement before insert triggers in our Apex language. There are two types of triggers, and inside this there are these six operations. These are the six operations on the basis of what these two triggers can be get called. Means either it can be before insert or after insert, or before update or after insert update, like that. First try to understand what are the syntax of the triggers, like how we write trigger. So let's try to understand how the before insert and after insert works. Okay, let's try to click on new, and you have to select Apex trigger option. Okay, Apex trigger. So let's try to save it, and you have to mention the name of your trigger, like whatever you want to. So what we are going to do, we are going to write a trigger on account of. So let's go and make it the name as account trigger. Okay, and from here you can select your account type on which you want to write this trigger. So I'm selecting account from this s1. So just click on submit. So you can see this is the syntax of your trigger. This is how you have created a trigger, like trigger which is of name account trigger, and it is created on account as object, and right now you are calling this trigger for before insert operations. Okay, so this is the syntax of our trigger, and inside this you can write your code. So for example, okay, let me show you how it is getting called or not. So if I make it before trigger called, okay, I'm mentioning this, and I'm not going to call it from anywhere else. I'm not going to call it from anywhere else. So when I'm going to insert any record into account, so this trigger will get called automatically, and we will get this print inside our logs, like here. So for example, if you want to clear this log, so what you have to do, just debug, clear, and log panel. Okay, so now let's go, and I'm going, first of all, let's delete this, and let's create one. So let's make it Aman trigger. Okay, Aman trigger account. I am mentioning this detail, and now I am going to save it. So the moment I save it, you see logs are generated. Correct? Logs are generated. So we have to check one by one, like which one of the logs is of, it's called for generated for our this trigger. So let's start from the bottom. So if I click on the logs, so you can see here it is mentioned that it is written on trigger, and the name of the trigger is account trigger on account trigger event before insert. Okay, so this means that this is a log which is generated when our this trigger is getting called. So the same way the log is generated in our Apex class, and click on debug one. So you can see our string is printed before trigger called. So you can see here the before trigger is got called. So I hope you got a little bit understanding, like how a trigger run. We didn't do anything, we have just created an account. So whenever this account got created, so before insertion of this record into database, this trigger got called. Why this trigger got called? Because we have, first of all, we have written this trigger on account object, and we are trying to insert the record in account object, and we have passed the before insert. There are some trigger context variables. Okay, so what this context variable do? So this variables just tell you the value in which context your trigger is getting executed. Means suppose, means it is kind of just a kind of identifier. I'll show you one more example in simple way. So for example, what I want, run a trigger, write a trigger on before insert, and if is available, if available field equals to true. Okay, if miss before trigger, I'm going to write a trigger on before insert operations. Okay, and in that I'm making it like if the field of that particular record is true, then update the rating field equals to warm. Update rating field equals to warm or hot or anything. So how we can achieve it? So can you tell me, like, how what we have to do? So in this case, what we have to do, we have to get the data of the record. we have to get the data of your record. What we are going to do, sorry, let me tell you first what we are going to do, what we are trying to implement. We want to implement that if account is getting inserted, okay, getting created, during the creation, means before the creation, if the checkbox is available is checked, so the field value of the rating field will be warm, and if it is not, then in that condition do nothing. For that, just a simple way, we need to get the detail of this record, right? We need to get the details of this record before inserting. Then we are able to check na, whether is available is checked or not. How we will get the details of this records which are going to inserted, because it is not inserted till now. So scenario for that scenario, our trigger context comes into picture. So let's start with the first. So there is a context variable named as new. So what this context variable do? This context variable returns a list of new version of S object record. New versions of S object record, what does it mean? It means the record which are going to inserted, means the record due to which your trigger is getting called. That record details we will be able to fetch by using new context variable. And the S object list means the list of S object which we will be getting using new keyword, new context variable, will available on insert, update and delete triggers, and records can only be modified in before triggers, which means you can't be able to update the record details in after trigger mode. Before updating, like we have already saw, like if you remember the difference. So here we see, if you want to update or validate the same record which is calling the trigger, we can do it inside before trigger. But if you want to update the related record of that object, then in that case we are using after trigger. So that's why it is saying us that whatever the detail you will get using new context, if you want to modify using that, so it can only be modified into before triggers, not in the after one. Okay, so that's a lot of theory. Let me show you the practical, otherwise you will get confused. So what we have to do, we have to run a for each loop. Okay, and which kind of data we are going to get? Account. So let's create account and make it ACC. Okay, and so just try to get it. I mean, this is a little bit tricky for you. So in Apex, what we are doing, we are trying to list account, and we are just querying and all that, like blah blah blah. These are things we are getting the list using SQL, right, in the Apex snippet, correct? If we want to get details of new S object record which are going to inserted, in that condition, we are going to use new trigger context. So you have to understand like all the trigger context, like if you see, so there are total 11 or maybe one more 12. So all this trigger is by default, this context variables are created by default. It is provided by system.trigger.class. So system.trigger class is already embedded, implemented by Salesforce end in the backend. So what we have to do, if you want to do, if you want to get the new S object list details which we are going to insert it right now into database. So for it, we just have to do a simple thing: trigger dot new. That's it. So inside this, using trigger dot new, inside the trigger dot new, we are getting all the newly S object records which are going to insert into database. So for example, if I go and try to print the value of ACC, because you know trigger.new will get passed inside ACC one by one, correct? This is we already know. I go and save it. And one more thing I want to tell you, whenever you write a trigger on an object, so if you want to check it, like by default, if you create a trigger is activated on account object by default. So what does it mean? This whenever any account record will get inserted, then in that case, this trigger will get executed. So why? Because this is active. Suppose if you want to deactivate this trigger, means you don't want this trigger anymore. So what you have to do, you have to just go on that object on which you have written that trigger. So for example, in our case, we have written the trigger on account object. So if you want to deactivate that trigger, you don't want that trigger anymore. So what you have to do, you just have to go on that particular account. In our case, it is account. And if you scroll a little bit down, if you scroll little bit down, so you can see here is that triggers. So if you click on this trigger, so here you will be able to see the trigger which you have written. So you remember, like we have written this trigger, account trigger, on our account only. So this is the account trigger. If you want to deactivate it, so what you have to do, you have to click on edit, or you can also delete it also. But if you don't want to delete it and all, you have to deactivate it. So you just have to click the checkbox like here and save it. So your trigger will get deactivated. And in that case, your trigger will not get called automatically whenever a new record will get inserted. So this is the thing I just wanted to tell you. But apart from that, let's go and check it. Like, okay, so we have written a trigger. So whenever a record will get inserted, so we will get the data inside this. So let's go and try it. So let's delete this and let's make it new and pass it account, sorry, Aman, new account. Okay, and let's start. Okay, let's make it is available equals to true. Miss whatever data user will mention during the creation of the record, this date all the data we will be getting inside that before true. So inside trigger.new. Oh, it has been saved. The data has already been stored inside trigger.new. So if I go and we have to check our logs. So let's try to open this one and let's try to debug. So you can see we got a debug on line number 4. So our debug is on line number 4. So what is there? We got account details, ID equals to null. We already know this because uh, right now the record is not inserted yet. And after that we got the name field, Aman new account, which we have mentioned. Apart from that, we will get all the details what user have mentioned before the creation. For example, let me show you is available or available. So you can see phone field is also available 1234 because user has mentioned that value before creation, and our is available field is not visible here because in logs not all things are visible. So if you want to check all the things, so you have to open raw log. So if I click on, and so in this it will be shown in a difficult. So you can see, so here if I go id equals to null, name equals to m1 new account, scroll a little bit down, yeah, phone equals to 1234, and every and other fields you can see they are null because user haven't we haven't mentioned any value inside these fields during the creations, right? So that's why we are getting the null for other value. So let us check for is available field. It must be true here. You can say is available equals to true. So we got the details of the record on which this trigger is running. So what we are trying to do, so we want to check if the trigger which is in, if the record which are getting inserted into database, if the is available checkbox on the trigger is true, then update the rating field of that record as a war. So how we will do, so just tell me, like, just get, we have just implemented, just think of, we will make a if condition, we are getting the value inside SEC equals true. So just remember one thing. In the case of before insert, in the case of before insert means when your trigger will get called in the scenario of before insert, if you want to update any field in that condition, you don't have to mention any DML operations. You don't have to mention any DML operation to update any field for that particular record. So for example, if I want to update the rating field of this record to warm. So what I will do, I will just simply do acc dot rating. Yeah. So this warm is the value what we have to pass. So we can't pass warm in any way here. So what you have to do, you have to go and check the pick list values. So in the accounts, we go in the fields and relationship, and here we have to search for rating field. So for example, rating, okay, rating, and let's open it. And inside, do you remember I've told you, like, to pass a list field we have to pass API name. So the API, so just copy it and pass it like that. So that's it. So you just have to mention the value which you want to update into that record in the case of before insert. Just remember it, okay? In the case of before insert, so you don't have to perform any DML operations like update or upsert or insert like that. You just have to mention the field reference and you just have to mention the value you want to update. That's it. So next time whenever this trigger will get called, it will check if that record is available equals true. So if it's true, then it will make it value as a worm. Okay, so this is the condition. If it is true, so what happens if I want to make another condition, and if it's false, okay, if it's false, then update the variable as hot. So just tell me, like for this thing we have already make it implemented, what I will do for this thing, just tell me here. It is, yeah, we will just do else because there will be only two way, either it is true else it will be false. So if it is not true, then it by default come in false. So if it is false, then in that condition what we will do, sec dot rating equals to hot. That's it. So let's go and try to create it. So first of all, let's try to clear the debug logs. Okay, so now we are ready. So let's go and try to create it. So okay, let's, I think let's, okay. So if I click on save, if I click on save, so if I go on details, so you can see the rating field of this account record has been updated to warm. Why? Because we have made this condition. If it is true, then it will become warm. So if I click on this logs and if I click on debug log, so you can see we, okay, so here we have just printed the value of the current record in which the details are getting updated. Okay, so this is the thing. So suppose if I go, if I go and try to update, I insert any other record, okay, Aman SEC, and in this condition I will not be checking this checkbox is available, and if I click on save, so just tell me what will the value will get stored inside rating field. It will store hot, correct. So this is how our trigger executes. Let's check what are the type of triggers. So this trigger events can be comma separated, so it can be before insert, before update, before delete, before sorry, after insert, after update, after delete, and after undelete. Means there will be no before undelete, okay, there will be only after undelete. So there, these are the 7 events. So whenever in the interview they will ask that how many type of trigger are there, so you have to tell that before triggers and after triggers, and inside this there can be 7 trigger events, which are before insert, before update, before delete, after insert, after update, after delete, and after undelete. 7. This, in this condition we have written a trigger for the before insert. So what happen if I also want to execute this trigger in the case of after insert? So in that case what you have to do, just have to put a comma, we just have to put a comma and mention our another operations, mean another trigger events on which we want to call this trigger. So now what happen, this trigger will get called twice. This trigger will get called twice. One is before insertion of the record, and second after the record is get saved to database. So for example, let's remove this. Okay, let's try to print only the value of SEC, and let's see whether this for each trigger is getting called twice or not. One is for before insert and second one is for after insert. Let's see whether it got executed twice or not. Okay, so let's go and let's try to insert the account. So let's go Aman account, okay, and let's try to click save. So if I open the logs, if I try to open here, our trigger is getting called first, so it called at the first time for before insert. So in that case, inside our SEC we don't have ID because right now our record has not been inserted into database. But second time again this trigger is getting called by after insert operation. So the second time when called, so in that case our SEC variable has ID of that particular record which got inserted, because this is got called when our record has been successfully inserted into your database. So I hope you got it. This is not a best practice, so differentiate between that. Suppose we have done it by using this apex trigger, okay, but let me tell you, but this apex class is going to called by this account trigger. So I am going to make it account trigger so that I will remember that it will handle the actions of this account trigger. So I'm making it the name, giving the name of this apex class as a account trigger handler, okay. So now what we'll do, I will go and I will write a method like public static void, and in this we will call like update rating, okay, because this method is used for update rating field. So this is the trigger new, okay. So I will pass all the data of the trigger.new inside this method by using list. So that will be kind of list of account, right? So let's make it list of account and make any name of this list. So let's make it account list. So now what I will do, I will remove each and everything from here, okay. I will remove each and everything from here and I will put it here, okay. I will put here, and apart from that, because this is the apex method, so it will get called by apex trigger. So in this case we will not getting the apex trigger.new. So what we will pass, we will pass the account list, and the data which is coming in the account list, it will be coming from the trigger. So for example, if I want to call this method, if I want to call this method update rating from our trigger, so for that what I want to do, we want to copy the name of the class, then we have to pass it like that, then dot, then the name of the method which you want to call, okay, and inside that you can simply pass trigger dot new. So I hope you got this. What we are doing, when this trigger will get called on before insert, so what we are doing, the compiler comes on line number 1, after that it comes on line number 3. So what is happening on line number 3, it is calling a method update rating from the class account trigger handler, and during the calling of this method they are passing the data of trigger.new inside this method. So that's why we are returning that trigger.new, which will be list of account which the user is going to insert in the database, because this trigger.new is stored into the trigger.class, system.trigger class. So we can't pass the trigger.new here. So you just try to remember what this trigger.new consists. It consists the list of account records, correct, which are going to insert by the user new records in the method when we are passing. So the method from when we are where we are passing, we call is as the augment. So we are passing augment, which is a trigger.new inside this method, and inside this method we are receiving that in account list as a parameter. Whatever data is there present in trigger.new, it will get stored into account list, because we are passing this data from this trigger inside this method, and this method is accepting that data inside this account list. And why we have mentioned list of account, because this is the type of data which this trigger.new will store. So suppose if we have created the trigger on contact object, so in that case what does this trigger.new stores, it will stores the list of contact records. This trigger will get called, okay, let's me, so this trigger will get called. After getting called, it will call the method of this class, and during the calling they will pass the list of records which will be passed here, and after that we will get a data inside account list. So it will again the same thing will happen, we run the for each loop, we access the variable like in SSC, then we check our condition if acc dot is available is true or not. If it's true, then acc dot rating is to warm, otherwise acc dot rating equals to hot. So just remember, we are not using any update dml operations to update, because it is getting called, means because this method is getting called in the context of before insert trigger. And in the case of before insert event, if you want to update any field value, we don't have to call update dml operations, we just have to mention the value. So if I go and try to create a new one, so this will work as the same. So suppose if I go and try to create anything like test, and if click is available, so that trigger will get called. What will happen? The trigger will get called and it will call this method, and after that the control comes on this method and all these things will get executed. So if available is true, then rating will become warm, otherwise it will become hot. So in our case, is available is true right now, so that's why rating become warm. So may this thing has been same, the only difference is that instead of performing all these operations inside the trigger, we have done it using a apex class. So this is the best practice. When you want to perform any operations, do it using a handler class like apex class. So this is the first prerequisite which you have to follow during writing a trigger, which means try to write as less as code you can inside your trigger. Okay, so that's all for this video. The next video we are going to learn about after insert trigger. So till then guys, goodbye and have a great day.